Welcome back to the Not Your Mama podcast. This is your host, Kelly Bryant, and I'm joined today by Kara Trochta. Kara is a dietitian. She's got all the information for us today about intuitive eating and what that can look like for you and what the heck that even means. But I'm going to let Kara introduce herself. Kara, can you tell us your pronouns and what emoji you most identify with?
Okay, yeah, I'm Keto Diet. As Kelly said, I'm a registered dietitian and former binge eater turned food therapist and eating coach. I coined that term myself, eating coach. So pronouns, she, her. That's about it, right? I don't know.
Emoji. What is your emoji?
Okay.
Who are you in
one
text
that
form?
is only there that I have to identify the most with is this.
Oh, the face palm.
I have 3 young kids, like that is the constant, but I'm waiting for the day that they develop the one that it's like the mom pulling her hair out, because that is the one that I need. 100%.
For me, for that one, I usually combine the scream emoji with one of the other angry faces where you're like, ah! Like that is how I capture that feeling.
Wouldn't it just be so much easier to have like pull your hair out? Like, come on, Apple.
I think it's the facepalm one. There's one of the emojis that isn't available on Facebook. So if you're not on your phone's keyboard and you're just like native in Facebook on your desktop, like it doesn't have, I forget if it's like the hair flip girl or if it's the face palm, or if it's the like X arms. One of those is not available. And like I'm like, I use this a lot. Far more than I think I realized, because like I was really counting on having this available to express myself.
Yeah, no, face palm for sure, 100%.
Okay, so you already told us you're a parent. You gave us a little bit of your professional background. I don't like to read a bio because like anyone listening just kind of goes like, So we know that our listeners are probably tired. So I want you to tell us what you think is interesting or relevant about you. That can be professional background, your family, your hobbies, how you got into what you're doing, whatever you want to share about you.
Yeah, hobbies, those would be nice to have.
Common response.
I don't know what that looks like in life right now. If I had to choose a hobby though, it'd be hand embroidery. Yeah.
Oh my God, you have to go listen to the episode that came out. Well, you don't have to listen to the whole episode. It's like a real heavy one. It's amazing. But the episode that just came out on, well, this isn't going to be on February 8th, episode 17. Holly experienced a late term miscarriage, and then she literally cross-stitched the entire Starry Night.
Ooh, that's awesome. That's like dedication right there.
The photo is, she sent me a photo of it, and the photo is in the show notes on my website. It's like, and of course, I did tell you this story because I downloaded it off of Facebook and I was on the verge of messaging her and being like, hey, can you send this to me over a different platform? Because it's all pixelated. And then I was like, oh my God, you idiot. It's cross-stitched.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not pixelated.
That's probably the funniest thing I've heard all day.
and of course I didn't do that because that would have been embarrassing, but now I told everyone, so
yeah.
I almost asked you for a clear picture of your cross-stitched Starry Night.
So if you get one of me that's pixelated, like it's truly pixelated, I didn't cross-stitch my own face, okay?
Right, exactly.
So professionally, personally, I don't know, I feel like I'm at this point in my life where they're very much intermingled. I tried to keep it separate and then realized like that just doesn't work. I mean, the long, short story is I went to school, studied nutrition, and didn't finish a degree in nutrition, went to work for a private label grocery store company. And that was like when dieting products like hit the shelves. Like we were creating all of these like quote unquote health and wellness products, like, you know, a pasta that was specific for diabetic people. And then no one would know how to use this. So then it kind of fed me back into really pursuing nutrition and being a dietitian. So I went back to school for another 3 years and ended up getting pregnant with our first child during my dietetic internship. So I graduated and 3 months later had a baby.
Woo!
And yeah, I did a little bit of work in community health. And then in between baby number 1 and baby number 2, I did some oncology nutrition.
Mm.
And then before baby number 2 was 1 year old, I got pregnant with baby number 3. So I had like 3 kids in 4 years. So there was a lot of nursing going on there.
Bless
And,
you.
a lot of nursing going on. Nutrition was kind of on the back burner, but, I fell victim to what I feel like every person who's just had a baby falls victim to. And that feeling of like, I've got to get my body back. Like I have to lose all the baby weight. And, that worked. I will truthfully say that worked out pretty well for me every time I nursed a kid and then got pregnant. Nursing helped me. But then after having 3 kids, knowing there wasn't going to be another one, it was like when all that fear and anxiety like really hit about, oh my gosh, I've got to do something. Like I can't let myself go after having baby number 3. And so much to the point that like 3 weeks postpartum, I went and joined a stroller strides class. And they're like, how many weeks postpartum are you? And I said 3. And they're like, you can't be here. And I'm like, but you don't understand. I'm at home with 3 small children. I need something.
I am so impressed by the entire concept of going to stroller strides with 3 small children. Did you give one away to like another parent?
So then what ended up being even more difficult was like they had to stay in the stroller the whole time.
Right. How do you
I had a double bob. Do what?
Can you do that?
I had a double bob. And so like one baby was in the infant carrier, one was just sitting in there. And then you know how the double bobs have like the triangle in the front? My oldest would just sit in the triangle on the front. So truthfully, that's how I used my double bob a lot. Like stroller strides didn't quite work out for me because I couldn't quite keep all 3 of them in the stroller. That became a problem. So
I'm shocked. I'm super shocked that you could not keep 2 toddlers and an infant happy inside of a stroller.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great concept. And I know many women who like benefit from it. It just wasn't going to work for me with 3 small ones. So then I found a gym membership that had childcare, and that was like life-changing. It even had a spa, and I could go get my hair cut, my nails done, like whatever, while my kids were in childcare. And it was the most amazing thing. Like, I don't know why more gyms don't do that. Like,
I honestly think that if like spas, salons had childcare, like they could really capitalize on like people actually getting their like touch-ups and stuff, like on the prescribed frequency or whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, so where was I going with that? Oh yeah, I had 3 kids. And so my life was really preoccupied by 3 kids. And, just in the back of my head, I can look back on like where I am now, like looking back on what it was and where I am now, I can see so much of how I was just such a victim to beating myself up about my body and feeling like it was a problem. And I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm still technically a stay-at-home mom. Like my office is at home and I still very much dictate my hours by my kids. But just that feeling of not knowing how to take care of myself. Like everything I did for so many years was about 3 littles. And like the only thing that I was able to do was go to the gym, and like everything revolved around that. Oh, I say that. My self-care looked like going to the gym in the morning and then having a Shiner beer at 4:00 every day until waiting, like to calm my nerves until my husband walked in the door. That is what my life looked like on repeat for so many years. And then,
Shiner is a Texas brand, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You're such a good Texan.
I am. I really am. I love everything about Texas. As you've commented once on my hair post one day about hot rollers. They're amazing. I guess it doesn't really work very well in Florida humidity though.
No, girl, no.
So yeah, I guess it all happened faster than I imagined. Like I really thought that I wouldn't do anything professionally until my youngest was at least in kindergarten. So then I could really devote that time. But I got asked to take on some clientele for a physician. And I was like, well, okay, but if I'm going to actually do this, I want to have my own practice. Like I want to do my own thing. But then it was like that fear, that comparison where you're just like, ugh, I just don't know if I can do this. And truthfully, it was because as a dietitian, everyone wants you to help them lose weight. And I struggled with that for so long. I mean, I will say I'm like an OG macro counter, because when we were in school, that's what we did. We
Yeah.
calculated everyone's macros when we gave them an eating plan, you know?
Right.
And now I look back and I'm like, oh, when I was trying to establish a practice, I just felt so hypocritical, because I looked at my own personal struggles with dieting and food restriction. And then, like, I'd say I was on a diet, but then come the weekend, it was a binge free for all, or definitely being like the mom who would hide in the closet, or not the closet, the pantry, close the door while her kids were playing, and like down, goldfish or whatever snack item it was, right? In
Cheez-Its are better if you're gonna, I
Oh,
mean,
no, 100% sure. Like, now Cheez-Its are allowed in my house, but back then it was like justifiable. The goldfish were for the kids.
yeah, right.
And so, just that idea of like those forbidden foods, the snack
Mhm.
foods
Mhm.
and whatever, like I was totally that binge eater. And
Did you like work on, and I don't like to use the word heal because it sounds like, oh, you're just like a finished after product, but like, did you work on your relationship with food prior to working in that way with your clients? Or was it kind of like in tandem? Because it was like, well, if I'm going to work with clients, I don't want to teach them what I'm doing.
It actually came before.
Okay.
So, I mean, I struggled, right? Like, I have a private practice. Sure, I'm thinking about doing this. Maybe I could help people lose weight. But again, just struggled with that. Like, I didn't feel truthful to who I was or what I really felt would be beneficial. And then for continuing education for my credential, I came across an intuitive eating course. And just taking that course, like literally from the get-go, I started implementing all these things for myself, and completely changed my whole mindset on how we approach eating, how we approach our relationship with food, the guilt that we feel with food, and just all of that association. I mean, 100%. I will say that I am so far deviated from where I was, gosh, 2.5 years ago, like so far removed from that, and just can finally like look back and say, man, I was in a really, really hard place. And I know there has to be other people out there who are in that, like still in that grind, especially if you happen to be staying at home, because there's just, you're surrounded by food every day. It's in your house. I mean, people now, like with this whole pandemic, like that's been a thing. Like, people have food in their house, and we tend to think that like if we just don't have it, then we won't eat it. But that
Mhm.
just kind of perpetuates that whole cycle.
Yeah,
So,
this is something my husband has always complained about because I mean, pre-COVID, like he always worked from home and I did not. And so I'd be like, buy the Cheez-Its. I want some Cheez-Its. And he's like, I can't, like, if I'm in the house with them, like, I'm going to eat them all. And of course, I'd be like, who the F ate all the Cheez-Its? I asked for Cheez-Its and now they're gone.
oh, my husband just did this to me the other day with this chocolate chip cookie. Like, his office has a cafeteria and it stayed open throughout COVID, so we could order food.
Hmm.
And so, like, we would do it once a week, just trying to support that business and whatnot. But they have the best chocolate chip cookies. And whatever meal we happened to order came with the chocolate chip cookies, and they are like coveted in our house. And it's like a 2-pack, right? And so we usually order like 3 things. We have 6 cookies, and he and I were eating lunch and I ate one, and I said, okay, I'm going to put this one in the pantry and I'm going to have it later. When I went back to get it a couple of days later, it was gone.
You know, no one talks about this aspect of marriage. I'm like,
When they eat the food that you want. I know.
my personal favorite,
It's just awful.
my dad, I don't recommend my dad's diet plan. My dad basically is like too busy to eat until dinner time, and then he consumes like 2,500 to 3,000 calories in 2 hours at dinner, which is remarkable. But like, I was over at my parents' house sometime in the last year, this was recent, and they'd eaten dinner, like sat down at the table and eaten a meal together. And then like my mom's doing something and he like goes in and starts just picking through the fridge. And my mom, she must have been preparing something like for, I don't know, an event or something that she like is putting, and she goes, she's like opening drawers, closing them in the fridge, shuffling things around. She goes, do you know where that goat cheese went? And my dad straight up is on the couch with an entire log of goat cheese. And it's just like, I'll go to Publix tomorrow.
It sounds like your dad has some problems with being ravenously hungry at the end of every day because he doesn't eat throughout the day.
Like, and I would say that it's a problem, except that it's just not a problem for him. He's just like, this is who I am.
Okay, well, maybe not your dad, but for a lot of people, that tends to be the problem.
Yes, for a lot of parents, like this is, so I hear, like this is not a struggle that I personally have had, which I'm very grateful for. But for a lot of parents, I hear the like, you forget to eat all day, whether you're actually forgetting or you're intentionally like skipping meals because that gets you a trophy. And then you get to the end of the day and you eat your food and then you eat all of the food that your children have left on their plates because you're starving still. And I'm like,
yeah, I mean, we try to outsmart our biology. But like, gosh, our biology's been around for a lot longer than whatever fad diet has been around.
Yeah.
And so, that's a huge thing is people trying to trick themselves, or like, if you think about the way a diet works, it like operates off of deprivation and restriction. And if you think about it, like from a bow and arrow perspective, like when you're restricting on a diet, you're pulling back, restricting. And then you get to that point where like, you cannot pull this bow back anymore. You cannot restrict anymore. And something happens. Either you snap and you're like, I cannot do this anymore. Or you go to an event and you like all of your quote unquote forbidden foods are around and you just release that arrow and it is like full on binge.
Right.
For a lot of people, this is what happens every single day when we, try to eat good all day, but then we walk in the door and we are so hungry. Our biology's kicked in and it's like, you just watch. I'm going to make you preoccupied with food and you will eat everything that I tell you to eat because I am so hungry and you have to feed me. And so, we try to outsmart it and it doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
And there's an element of this that I think is so interesting, which is like, there's the biological hunger of like, if you're physically not satisfying your like need to eat, but there's also the like psychological hunger of like, you've spent the whole day being like, bad person. Like, how could you want that food? You can't have that. You can't. And you get to the end of the day and you're just like, you've taught yourself that food is comfort. You taught yourself, your parents taught you, like, whatever, that like, when you feel like a bad person and like you're terrible, right? You like start to eat the forbidden food and then it's like, this is delicious, but you're not physically hungry anymore, but you need the comfort, the emotional support of like continuing to eat literally what we call comfort food.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting, I want you to actually give like a proper definition of intuitive eating. But what I think is interesting is that intuitive eating does talk about your emotional hunger and your physiological hunger and like satisfying both. And like that tension for me is so interesting, that like that there can be like a healthy, and I mean emotionally healthy, way to satisfy yourself with food and a very emotionally unhealthy way of satisfying yourself with food. And like, how do you know the difference? So if you like, I feel like we've kind of like given a very like rough overview of like what intuitive eating is by talking around it, but like, can you define what it is?
At the heart of it, it's really just this like anti-diet approach to eating. It eliminates all deprivation and restriction, like no food is off limits, but that sounds really scary to a lot of people, but it gives you tools to guide you. Like you become more attuned with your body. You are eating based off of your biological cues. You learn to listen to what hunger feels like for you. Some people that means gurgling in your stomach, growling in your stomach. Others, it's a headache. All the way to being able to stop when you're comfortably full, which is a really hard concept for a lot of people because they almost have FOMO. Like, oh, if I stop eating this now, this is the only time that I'm going to get this food and I'm not going to get to have it again. So I need to eat I need to eat all of it. But we also work on giving yourself that unconditional permission to eat. And that's really embracing the ability to make peace with food. taking all of these foods that we are told are quote unquote bad foods, and making peace with them. And like the most miraculous thing in all of this is it's like you have to eat the foods that you have forbidden for so long before you can actually make peace with them. And when you do that, the very foods that you think you used to crave or that you had forbidden don't become an issue anymore. Like they are not controlling every single thought of every single day. They are not this constant source of anxiety or guilt that, oh my gosh, I ate 2 Oreos today. Like I'm such a bad person. I have to be good tomorrow. And like that whole language goes away. None of this, like the diet starts Monday or man, I was really bad today. I have to be better tomorrow. I mean, there's 10 principles that go to intuitive eating. I think the best way to sum it up is it's just that anti-diet approach to eating where you learn to become more attuned with your body and you look at health from, sorry, bus stop alarm going off over here. But you just become more attuned with your body and that really becomes your guide. And along the way, you learn to balance the emotional part of eating. So we take a deeper dive into emotional eating. And what I like to tell my clients and help them work with is like, don't beat yourself up if in the past you've turned to food for comfort or when you were bored or when you were lonely. I mean, that was me 100%. Anytime my husband would leave on a work trip, we better have had quote unquote junk food in our house because I had to do something to keep myself from being bored and lonely. But when you look back at it and you can approach it from the standpoint of, okay, I was trying to take care of myself. I was trying to make myself feel better. And maybe the only way that I knew how to was turning to food. But when you start to realize that and you look at it as more like this cue, like, okay, I'm standing in the pantry. I'm not physically feeling hungry, but I'm looking for something. I'm seeking out something. You can use that as that cue that, okay, my body's trying to tell me that something's going on that I need to address. And you can start to build different coping mechanisms from there. But when we try to say like emotional eating is bad and it needs to be stopped, it's that you've put this label on it and said, okay, well, this is bad. This makes you a bad person if you do this.
Right.
But if you take that label off and say, okay, I'm learning how to take care of myself. And sometimes that means I need to have 2 pieces of chocolate to take my mind off of chocolate. And then I can go do whatever it is that I need to address whatever emotions I'm feeling. That's a stepping stone. And then eventually what happens is you learn like, well, I can get that same good feeling without the food. And so that's what you start to turn to. But it's a process. Like we live in that society of quick fixes and it's done more harm for us in so many aspects, not just health, but yeah, I mean, it's not a quick fix, which is not what people like to hear. But I mean, I'll say if I could go back and just think about like the years that I spent just beating myself up, all of it, and just not wanting that for my daughter, not wanting that for nieces, I mean, nephews, I mean, anyone, not to have anyone feel that way about themselves. And just, I think the thing I'm most tired about in this, I don't want to say role, but in this space, and the more clients I talk to is how much they belittle who they are and their successes because of weight. A lot of, well, I've accomplished this, I've accomplished this, I've accomplished this, but none of it matters because my weight isn't, because I'm not skinny, because my weight isn't quote unquote healthy.
Right.
And that just took years of dedication and hard work and accomplishment and achieved it and just completely washed it away and erased it because society tells you that in order to be worthy, in order to be beautiful, in order to be successful, you have to be skinny.
Yeah. And I mean, oh God, there's so much to unpack there. And this is something that I say all the time, and I will say till I die, like, no circumstance changes how you think and feel, right? So like even if you get skinny, you'll just replace skinny with something else, right? So that's what, I mean, that's like, there's the whole like good girl mentality of like, I have to be worthy, I have to be good, I have to achieve things, I have to be nice, I have to be liked, I have to be popular, like whatever. And skinny is just like another thing to pile onto it. And the truth is, there's no number of accomplishments that you can get to make you believe that you're worthy. Like that just doesn't come from external validation. And like, I think, like you described, many people have to go down like a little bit into like that dark rabbit hole of like, let me prove it to myself. Like I have to, you have to, I don't want to say like rock bottom. That's very dramatic, but like you almost have to experience it firsthand and get to the point where you're like, oh my God, this didn't make me any happier. And
I
like,
think it's just so many people are on that, like, they're just stuck because
mm-hmm.
they don't feel like there's any other option other than being on a diet, because they don't know how to eat if they're not on a diet, because it's that fear of, well, if I eat foods that I like, isn't that just going to, make me gain weight or make me unhealthy? So it's like this, there's no, they don't feel like there's a middle ground. And that's
right.
really where intuitive eating falls, is that middle ground of balancing like that nutrition, like nourishing your body, but then also balancing it with living life and like enjoying whatever it is that we tend to label as bad, whether that's dessert or alcohol or,
Yeah.
like it's putting that into perspective and not, I mean, it's basically as it's likening the emotional reaction from eating broccoli to a cookie is what like the basis of that is. Like, you're not going to have any more emotional attachment to eating cookie than broccoli going down this path.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know how to explain that any better, but it's basically removing these deep rooted emotions associated with certain foods.
And I think, so here's one of the things that I really would love for you to speak to. And I mean, intuitive eating and like specific, I don't know if trademark or whatever, healthy at every size, like they are like, I don't know if researched is the right word, but like deeply kind of thought out protocols.
It is
And
it is definitely science-based and evidence.
yes, so this is what I want you to address is like, we all know that because, I don't know, God and the doctor said so, that if you are overweight, if you have a BMI over X, you are less healthy. You are going to have worse health outcomes. You're going to have high blood pressure, heart disease, get cancer, and die at 37. Because that's like, especially when it's parents, the motivation of long life is like a very compelling one of like, I have to be healthy for my kids. And the way they're actually doing healthy is only taking away from their kids, depriving their children of their like actual present focused attention. That's a soapbox for another day. So, is it actually healthier to weigh less?
So that's kind of I don't know, that's like a dark hole. The way that it's worded is kind of a dark hole. Now, if you were to say, can someone who has a BMI or that puts them in overweight or obese be healthier than someone who has a BMI that is quote unquote normal? The answer is yes.
And healthy, you're using the word healthy to like blood measurements or something like what?
Yeah, I mean, there's individuality in each person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use myself as an example. My struggle with body image and my weight really started in college when I started studying nutrition. I didn't have issues with food growing up. I wasn't told that I needed to be a certain weight. That all I put on myself when I started studying nutrition, because that's when I first calculated BMI.
Mm-hmm.
And my BMI put me in that overweight category. And as soon as I was labeled that, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I thought that, gosh, I'm not doing everything I possibly can to be healthy, despite the fact that my health habits would suggest otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, like, I was an active person growing up. I had a healthy relationship with food. I ate foods that were nourishing. I ate foods that were also just good because they tasted good. And then when I went down that path of incorporating diet into it, unbeknownst to me until I'm now, how old am I? 34, that what I was doing from that point until about 2.5 years ago was actually more harmful than if I would have never started dieting. Like
Mhm.
my BMI is not, does not include my genetics. If you could see me, I'm 5'1"
I
and
was going to say, you are a small human.
I'm muscularly built.
Mhm.
There will be no amount of dieting that would ever be able to get me to a point of that BMI saying I was normal.
Mhm.
But my health, what it boils down to is those health habits.
Mhm.
Now, that's not to say that engaging in routine medical, not, I don't want to say medical procedures, but routine wellness visits and having blood work done and being proactive about those things, those are health habits that promote your health.
Mhm.
But it's not the end all to be all. Like we live in a society where it's almost like the answer to every health problem is lose weight.
Right.
Lose weight. There's no possible way that stress could be causing anything else in your life. We
Which
don't
we
look
know stress is like the
No,
root
yeah,
cause
we
of like
don't look
everything.
for alternative reasons for
Mhm.
certain medical conditions other than turning to weight loss as the first answer,
Mhm.
when it needs to be a more well-balanced approach into, mental health, emotional health, physical
Mhm.
health, stress management, movement, like all of those things really need to encompass health. And that's what
Mhm.
those health habits are. So to the point of like, you could have someone who is technically overweight or obese, but everything that they are doing, their health habits promote their health. They are moving on a regular basis. They have a healthy relationship with food. They're not trying to engage in dieting, which, sidebar, dieting, what ends up happening is the more you diet, the more you restrict. Your body thinks it's starving, so it has to turn to alternative fuel sources. It starts to break down your muscle. It slows your metabolism. And
Right.
so when you're slowing your metabolism, your body, when you eat again, your body's kind of like, well, is she going to feed me on a regular basis? I don't really know. And
So I
so
need to
it
store
just
this
puts
as fat, right? Yeah.
everything out of whack. Whereas
Mhm.
if you just would have maintained whatever weight you were at, it's actually more beneficial for you in the
Mhm.
long run. But your health habits. So, like I said, movement, you have a healthy relationship with food, you have stress management practices in place, you have emotional health in check, meaning you have good coping mechanisms, whether that means whatever you do on your own or you're seeking out help from a therapist. You have good boundaries in place for your own life, meaning work and home life
Mhm.
are and I don't even want to say balance, because I saw something that was really interesting about whatever you prioritize is not going to be balanced with everything else, but you
Mhm.
have to be okay with those priorities.
Right.
Like,
Of your own, yeah, your own boundaries. I like boundaries better than balance, is like
yeah,
just like that,
it can
you,
change.
right.
It can change. Like there might be a week that it's a little heavier on work and not so much on personal life, but then the next week, like, and it's really that prioritization.
Mhm.
Whereas you could have someone who is like the quote unquote picture of health,
Mhm.
whose BMI is normal, they have a thin body appearance, and no doctor is going to think twice
Right.
about this person's health because they're the picture of health, right? Their BMI is normal
Mhm.
when everything they're doing could not be promoting health. They
Right.
could have horrible eating habits. They don't engage in any sort of movement practice. They have horrible anxiety and stress, and
Mhm.
everything is out of whack. But we put so much value on outward appearance
Mhm.
that's really where that paradox comes in. So to say that, having a lower BMI makes you healthier is not, I wouldn't say, I mean, that's not the end all to be all, because you have caveats and you have different ways to look at it from each perspective. And like, I will forever have a BMI that tells me I'm overweight, but I've been able to get past that
I was
label.
going to say that must be so liberating to just like be able to say that. Like, I think that there's probably people listening who are like, that will never be me, right? That are like, I will never be able to be okay with like the scale not saying whatever. And it's just like, if that's what you want your life to look like.
I remember when the only thing I wanted in life was to be skinny. And I really thought that it would erase all my problems. I thought I'd be a happier person. I thought I would be more successful. Like I would felt like my whole life would be like sorted out. Like I'd have it all figured out if only I was skinnier.
I mean, the truth is, like, I have been skinny my whole life. Like, aside from pregnancy, from college to now, I've been within maybe a 7-pound weight range. Like, I have had real shitty years. I've had super unhealthy times in my life, and I've had much healthier ones. And like, I've had times where my mental health was like not good, and I've had times where it is. And like, that has never been because of what I weighed. Sometimes your weight is a symptom. And I think that's like, I wish that that's the way the medical field looked at it, where it was like, okay, you know, this is like my compromise. I'm like proposing this compromise to the medical field. I'm like, what if we had someone come in and they had a high BMI and we could just, and high, fucking arbitrary, but like a high BMI, and we could just say like, okay, this is outside the range of normal. Let's look at your health habits and see if maybe this weight is a symptom of a problematic health habit. And then you look at the health habits, and if you're like, no, those are all fine, then it's just like, that's what you fucking weigh. Like,
it's still just the whole idea of like the premise of BMI, period. Like, again,
yeah,
putting
which
a label of normal.
Yeah.
But like, there's so many things that go into what makes us up, our genetics, our cultural, you know,
it's almost more that we should be looking at like Kara. Like, if Kara goes into the doctor for her annual visit and she's gone up by 30 pounds or gone down by 30 pounds,
what is going on?
Like, that should be a red flag in either direction, and not like a red flag like, oh my God, this is a problem, now you need to lose weight. It should just be like, oh, it's like the same as if someone came in, this is a horrible example, with like a rash. You would be like, that's new. Like, or maybe I'll use the example of a mole. Be like, that's new. Let's like biopsy this. Let's look at it. And of course, if they biopsy a mole and there's nothing wrong with it, they just go like, okay, you got a mole. Like, that's fine. And again, this is like my compromise. Of course, it would be lovely if weight just like was not a thing that we were looking at, and we were just looking at primary health habits. But like, unfortunately, the system, and I'm sure I don't want to set you off on a rant, but I kind of do. The like medical structure that we have is such that like it's insurance providers that are paying doctors, not patients. And the doctor has, 12 minutes or whatever to see you. And the more testing and the more intervention they can do, the more money they make. And so like, I'm not saying that they are bad people who don't prioritize your health. I'm just saying the incentives are built in for them to see you as little as possible and have as many problems as possible. Prescribe as much.
But there's also, to the point too, though, like, we are very much a reactive medical approach versus preventative. Right. And so a lot of times people don't actually go to the doctor until there is something wrong. And then the I don't want to say right amount or the right approach, but there's not enough time built in to really look at this in a deeper dive. And that's a whole healthcare model and system. And that is not my area of expertise. I like to stay in my own little bubble of just helping people realize, like,
because you're 100% self-pay, right? Do you take insurance?
Yeah, I am 100% self-pay. And truthfully, that's because there's not probably anything that you could put on a code, like as a code, that would reimburse my services, because my services don't focus on weight loss.
Right.
I mean, my focus
is fucked up in itself. Like, and herein lies the problem that like,
I mean, it would literally be like, I could fraudulent, like, well, I'm not going to put myself in that. Like you might be able to, but like, that's not the premise of intuitive eating, is not weight loss. And truthfully, probably because of a lot of that, I don't have as many clients as I would like because everyone still looks for that quick fix, right?
Right.
Everyone wants
And
the
it's
hook
not
in the
affordable, right? Like I see this problem too, that first of all, like, I mean, speaking for myself, I have not gone to the gynecologist since I had my daughter. Like, I had my 6-week postpartum visit, and I haven't been since my daughter was born. I literally have never been to my doctor in Florida, and I've lived here since 2017.
I'm looking at you right now.
I know.
Literally, I
But
just had a post about this in my self-care challenge about how like scheduling and actually going to routine medical visits is a
I
form of
work in
self-care.
this field. And I work in this field. So like think about the people like you who have 3 kids. Like I'm sorry, they don't have childcare. Like how are you going to go to the doctor if they don't have childcare? And like what if you're uninsured? Like then or just underinsured, like that you're looking at like, okay, if I go to the doctor, I'm going to have this much of a copay and they're going to do blood work and the blood work's going to cost this. And like, I feel fine, right? This is why we don't get preventative care. You're like, I feel fine right now. And I'm going to have to pay a babysitter or my partner is going to have to miss work so that I can go spend $200 or $300. That is like my entire month of groceries. This is why we don't have preventative care. And this is why people are trying to solve their problems by dieting them away. That you're like, well, as long as the scale doesn't go over whatever your number is, 150, 170, 200, as long as the scale doesn't go there, then I'm fine.
But
So I just need to keep dieting.
But then 95% of diets fail, right? And
yes.
2 out of 3 people end up gaining like all the weight back and then some.
And then some. Yep.
And that's where the problem is, and then some. And truthfully, it's just I don't know, you can't pinpoint like what the actual problem is. Like what's the cause of all of this? Like what is the problem? But I think a lot of it is the value that we put on appearance and that thinness, like that's a huge part of it. And then really thinking that we have to go to extremes. We live in a lot of like all or none mentality, and in the extremes, you're either, it's like, if you eat that cookie, you already have 1 foot in the grave.
Oh my God.
It sounds silly, but
people think this. No, for sure. People think this, but
it's a struggle. It is such a struggle. And just helping like people realize it's a balance, right? Like one meal, one day is not going to make or break your health for the rest of your life. Like we just live in that really all or nothing mentality.
But what will is not make or break your health for the rest of your life. But the thoughts that you have about that meal are a habit that you're building, right? So we talk a lot about habits of like, oh yeah, you should like eat 5 vegetables a day or whatever. But like,
why did we put a number on it? Like people then put obsess about it, right?
Right.
I'm like, if anyone's watching,
flailing, right?
Kelly,
but we don't think about the fact that the thoughts we're having about ourselves and about our choices are also habits that we're building. That like, okay, you eat quote unquote bad food and you're like, oh no, now I'm contributing to this negative habit of not eating good food. But also, if you're going to beat yourself up about it and be like, oh my God, 1 cookie, I'm 1 foot in the grave, you're also building a habit of chronic stress. And that's, I think, a big component of dieting that's so problematic is that like we know inflammation and high cortisol levels are one of the root causes of every chronic disease. That if we actually had, and I don't know if there's actual studies on this, but like my guess is if we looked at weight, BMI, whatever, and only looked at the people who did not have chronic stress and high cortisol levels, I highly doubt that they would have the negative health effects that are being associated with weight and BMI. And this is what I was kind of saying about like, I often think weight is a symptom or weight gain is a symptom of chronic stress.
I feel like I was just reading something that would help.
For the audio, y'all, she's literally going
Yeah,
through a book right
I'm
now.
looking through the intuitive eating book. It's the new revised edition of it. And
Oh,
so what they've done is, quick backstory. They came up with this in 1995, and like now
yeah, it
you're
took
just starting to
25
hear
years to, yeah.
more about intuitive eating and health at every size. And when they started it, they didn't have scientific evidence for this. There wasn't that base. It was rooted in like evidence of what they were seeing with their own clients. And then they built this model. And since then, the research has followed. There's been like 125 studies to date on intuitive eating, the method of intuitive eating, the benefits of intuitive eating. And so in this edition, they are able to cite a lot more research that has been done, that promotes that proves that this works, and that the dieting doesn't work, that it actually causes more harm on biological and emotional and psychological
Yeah, your
levels.
system is not designed. And this is something that I did want you to, we talked about this a little bit before we started, but I would love for you to address is like chronic stress and heightened cortisol levels is one way that dieting can like actually be quite bad for your health. You talked about metabolism and how like you can, and I think somewhat permanently, like you can really damage your metabolism by like yo-yoing your weight. But from like a nutritional level, give us the science. Like you're quite likely to not get the nutrients you need if you're restricting food. Yes? No?
Well, yeah,
Evidence?
so literally dieting is chronically underfeeding your body, is what you're doing. Like your body thinks that it's starving. And so by starvation, it has to go through this whole cascade of like basically diverting what it normally knows into saying, okay, I need to be in survival mode. And that's a whole nother, biological mechanism that's going on. And so let's just use carbohydrates as an example, because, carbs seem to be the enemy for most people these days. But like if you don't get enough carbohydrates, and you're not getting enough through the diet, our brains, our central nervous system, and our red blood cells primarily only run on glucose, and the best sort of glucose is carbohydrates. And so when you eat carbs, your body breaks it down into glucose, and that glucose is carried through your body. And my bad joke is that everyone's crazy because we don't eat enough carbs because we're not getting enough glucose to our brain. But
I get plenty of glucose to my brain. My crazy is from something else.
But so, when you're not eating enough carbs and your body's not being able to get enough glucose, it has to find that source of glucose somewhere. And it turns to breaking down your lean muscle mass. And that's really your powerhouse of metabolism. The more muscle you have, the faster your metabolism is. But when your body needs glucose, it's going to start breaking down that muscle mass to get the protein so that it can convert the protein into glucose. And so when you do that, that's why people have success on quick fix diets, is they're chronically underfeeding themselves. So their body is then breaking down their protein, and their muscle mass. We know that muscle weighs more than fat. So you're breaking down something that weighs more than fat, and then you're releasing a whole lot of water every time you break down protein from muscle. So you're excreting a whole lot of water weight too. So that's why people tend to see success on these diets, is because it's really breaking down your powerhouse. It's like if you think of your muscles as the framing of your house, and you need to have a fire, and you need fuel for the fire, and you're not actually, going out and chopping firewood. Instead, you're just going to take the frame out of your house and throw it in there, right? Pretty soon that's going to crumble and fail on you.
This is a similar issue, by the way, with like low to moderate intensity, steady state cardio. Like if you're just burning calories, if all you're looking at in your workouts is calorie burn, it's the exact same process of like, yay, you're going to get into a calorie deficit, but you're going to eat your muscles. And like, that's my really technical. You're going to eat your muscles, and like that you're not going to be able to actually maintain any kind of physique or weight change because you're just going to lose all your muscle mass. So it also just doesn't work.
The thing is like diet is just at the heart of it, it's chronically underfeeding your body
Mhm.
is what it is. Your body thinks it's starving, so it goes into survival mode. And everyone's like, well, what about fat? What about keto? Like, very, very little of your fat stores can actually be converted into glucose. So then, you still have the problem of your body is not being able to get enough glucose for its normal reaction. And to the point of, do you know why the keto diet exists?
I mean, I know that like generally the like quote unquote research is like largely based on super jacked athletes. So it's like if you're eating and exercising at a level that you literally can't lose muscle, then like yes, it would make sense logically that your fat gets consumed. But no, tell us.
So the keto diet was actually in quote unquote invented for children with epilepsy.
Oh yes, 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 yes. I did know this because it's like, yeah, it has to
To
do
help.
with like your brain. And there is evidence that like if you have certain brain disorders, that this type of eating, but like we're talking, yeah, like epilepsy, not like
But it's to the point of like you can take anything and turn some. There's going to be some craze. There's always going to be some diet that's out there, and it just comes down to the matter of like, do you want to spend the rest of your life jumping from one diet to the other, or do you actually want to get to a point in your life where you have made peace with food and it's balanced, and you
Mhm.
can know that you are truly nourishing your body, you're giving it the nutrition that it needs, but then you're also just enjoying food
I
because.
was gonna say, and wildly improving your quality of life.
Right. Like food is meant to be enjoyable. Like it's supposed to be a normal activity of daily living. Like
Yeah.
eating is part of self-care. And when we don't eat, I don't know. I don't like being hangry. I don't like it when my kids are hangry. They don't like it when I'm hangry. We just tend not to try to get there.
Yeah. So let's for anyone who's like kind of their ears are perking up and they're like, okay, like maybe I'd be willing to dabble in this. Can you, because we're like right out of time. So I want to make sure we give people something kind of like actionable that they can do other than get really upset about the healthcare system. Um
Very
can
Kelly
you get
soapbox.
yeah, right? If someone is interested in like trying this out, like what is a way that they can practice intuitive eating for like a meal or for a day?
I would say one of the biggest things that you could do, and it's so small. One thing that would make one of the biggest differences is not being distracted while eating,
Mm,
not trying to multitask. So put those distractions away. Turn the TV off, put the cell phone away, don't read, don't look at social media, don't try to work and eat at the same time. Try to actually focus on eating, and that meal is right there in front of you. And looking at it from a standpoint of, how does this taste? What flavors am I picking up? Do I actually even like what I'm eating? We tend to just put it on autopilot.
mhm.
But one of the biggest things is putting those distractions away, because what happens is when we're distracted, I don't even want to call it mindless eating, because mindless would mean like you have no clue that you're doing it, but you're distracted eating. You don't really know when you've stopped. It's like everything's gone and you're like, "Oh, well,
Oh, yeah.
everything's gone. Am I still hungry? Am I not still hungry?" I don't even like know how that tasted. So I
Mhm,
think like limiting that distracted eating can be one of the biggest changes that you can make. And it's something that can be easily done, and you just have to make that choice to say, "Okay,
mhm,
and it doesn't even have to be every meal. Choose one meal or snack a day to start with and see how it goes."
mhm.
So
I love
that would
that.
be
I
that would
think
be
that's super actionable. And I think it's also like, I mean, if mindful is in the name, I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's like actually be where our feet are for, 20 minutes or something when you're eating meal. That's the other thing is like we multitask because we think it's faster. If you just sit down and eat your food and you're not like going back and forth between like your food and something else, you get to eat your food while it's hot. And it's actually not that much time. Like if you walk away from your desk and you just do it instead of spending like 2 hours eating a plate of food while you're doing something else, like you actually can like do one thing 100% present and do something else 100% present.
Even if you just were to like commit 10 minutes to that
Mhm.
meal, Like truthfully, 20 to 30 is better because it gives your body that time to actually send the signal to your brain that you're full. But like even just 10 minutes of non-distracted eating can make a huge, huge impact.
Mm-hmm. And if you do it with your partner, you might discover you like actually like them more than you remembered. They appreciate that. Like if you're like, I'm gonna like just our daughter has been, and we have been really trying to intuitively eat with her and let her just, if she's not hungry anymore, that's fine. So my husband and I have been getting lengthy dinners alone. She just like goes to her room and plays, and we're like, okay, bye. And we just get to hang out and eat a meal. It's so nice.
Almost like a date.
Almost. Aside from the fact that you're, spending your meal going, you need to poo poo? Okay, can you pull your pants down?
Oh, yes.
All right. So tell folks where they can find you on the socials, and if they want to work with you, how's all that work? How can we find you?
Honestly, the easiest thing would be to follow me on Instagram. It's at Trochta.
And that's KARATROCHTA.
Yes, it is. And that's truthfully the easiest way, because I'm going to say this and Kelly's going to roll her eyes at me. I still don't have a website. So yeah, that's on my to-do list for the year. But yeah, I mean, follow me on Instagram. Kind of what I have in the works right now is I just released a 30-day self-care challenge, and it's really an ongoing thing. So it doesn't mean like it has to start, today and go for 30 days. It's really self-paced, but just 30 days of, health promoting things that you can do on a daily basis that promote physical health, mental health, emotional health, setting boundaries, reframing that mindset of what actually health means to you. So really easy things like looks like this.
I was going to say, so I would have to go schedule my gynecologist appointment.
Yes, that is one of them.
I will have you know, my
wellness visits.
I used a birth center and midwife for my baby. My OBGYN left the practice that she was at and is now like 2 hours away. So I have to find a new OBGYN. It's like a whole thing. Please throw me a pity party.
What about dentists? Do you go to the dentist?
I do. I am on my dental game because I found one who is close by, and they schedule it every 6 months.
But here's the other thing too, though, like to the point though, of like, it can be daunting to want to go to the doctor if you don't have that relationship established, or even if the weight thing is an issue.
Right. I was going to say, for people who are quote unquote overweight and obese, like that's such a fucking trigger. Like, why would you ever want to go there?
Even if you're not overweight or obese, you just have that weight stigma, right? Like if you personally just, like if it will undo you, it can be so hard to want to schedule those. You have the right to not be weighed. Like you can ask to not be weighed. And if they say, oh no, we really need to for whatever reason, you can step on the scale, turn around and say, I don't want to know what it is. And you don't have to know. But if it's, unless it's like for prescribing a medication, there's really no correlation to really them needing to know what that weight is, unless it's, for medication. But yeah, so I get that. Like I get, wanting to establish that relationship and having that relationship. And I think that's important just in general with any practitioner that you go to, is having that repertoire that's there to be able to feel confident enough to be proactive in your own healthcare. Because if you're not taking care of your own health, like nobody is. Like you have to prioritize that, and it has to be your responsibility.
And it's wild because I would never let my kid miss one of her checkups.
But you also have that like if it was a pediatrician that you didn't particularly like, you would be actively seeking out someone that you wanted her to go to. And that's kind of the same thing as, trying to schedule those things where you have someone that you trust. But anyway,
I'm sold on the challenge. I think everyone should go do your 30-day challenge. And that's super cute. If they're not looking at the video, they can't see that, but it is very cute.
And then it also has a bonus evaluation. So it goes through like physical, mental and emotional boundaries. And like you can check off things that you do that currently promote your self-care, and then check off things that currently interfere with your promotion of healthcare. So I love it. As a way to guide like where areas that you need more growth. And then like you, I also have a reclaim program. Mine's Reclaim Your Health. But it's a 12-week program that's kind of ongoing. So
Cool.
you know.
Amazing. And that's all through your Instagram if they want to go there.
Yeah, you can
Cool.
just message me through Instagram and answer any questions
Sweet.
you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for preaching the good word.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kelly.